I've witnessed more bizarre things than I can count during my 60 cycles as a docking coordinator on Terminus Halo. I've seen Vraxian warlords settle cargo disputes with arm wrestling matches. I once watched a Cathethran melt his own luggage after sneezing acid at the wrong angle. And I will never forget the day a Grundle matron decided the food court was an appropriate place to give birth, an event absolutely no one needed to experience. Still, none of that prepared me for the day Kira Voss stepped onto my station. The alert hit my console during third shift. Standard civilian transport. Mixed species passenger list. Routine inspection. I was halfway through lunch, fermented kelp paste, not great but filling, when my assistant Rollo burst into my office. Rollo is a Quilix. Small, fuzzy, and permanently on edge. The poor creature flinches when the air recyclers change pitch. Vivex, he squeaked, whiskers trembling like he'd spotted death itself. You need to see this. That got my attention. I followed him to the observation deck overlooking Bay 7. The liner had already docked, and the usual chaos was spilling out, families dragging cargo, traders shouting, a pair of bounty hunters trying far too hard to look dangerous. Then she walked down the ramp. Human. Female. Average height for her kind, around 1.7 meters. Dark hair pulled back in what I later learned was called a ponytail. She wore practical clothing, cargo pants, a fitted jacket, boots that looked like they'd survived multiple planets. One bag hung from her shoulder like it weighed nothing. She should have blended in. Instead, the entire bay reacted. Predator species moved first. Not politely. Instinctively. A Vraxian enforcer, 2.5 meters of muscle and scars, flattened himself against the bulkhead to let her pass. A Caltherian pair, known for dissolving armor with acid spit, suddenly became fascinated with the ceiling. Even a Grundle mercenary, a species that treats pain as recreation, shifted aside to give her room. The human didn't slow down. If she noticed, she didn't care. She walked with an easy, rolling stride, completely relaxed, green eyes scanning the crowd. She wasn't threatening anyone. She wasn't posturing. She was simply, there. What in the 7 nebulas is that? I muttered. Rollo looked like he might faint. Predator, he whispered. Apex predator. Rollo, I said, half the beings here are predators. Not like that, he replied, pointing with a shaking paw. Look at the prey. I did, and my confusion doubled. The prey species weren't running. They weren't panicking. They were watching her carefully, almost respectfully. And that was when a Puna child waddled straight toward her. The Puna child toddled toward the human without fear, soft feet slapping lightly against the deck. From the observation deck, I saw the mother freeze in absolute terror, her frills tightening as if bracing for tragedy. The human, Kira, noticed immediately. She lowered herself into a crouch, moving slowly, carefully. Her face softened into a warm smile as she said something I couldn't hear over the distance. The child chirred happily and reached up. Kira gently ruffled the fuzz atop the kid's head, then stood and gave the mother a small, respectful nod before continuing on her way. I stared. That shouldn't happen. Rollo swallowed hard. Prey species know, he said quietly. They know she isn't hunting them. I switched my focus to the customs checkpoint as Kira approached. The inspector on duty was Kroth, a Vraxian veteran who once bragged to me that fear had never touched him. Yet when he saw Kira, Kroth straightened, posture sharp and formal, like a soldier acknowledging a superior. She handed over her documents. Purpose of visit? Kroth rumbled, claws clicking faster than usual. Refuel. Resupply, Kira replied calmly. Maybe grab a meal. I hear you finally have decent human food on the promenade. We do, Kroth said quickly. Level 15, Section 12. He stamped her clearance faster than I'd ever seen him process paperwork. Welcome to Terminus Halo, Miss Voss. Thanks. She slung her bag over her shoulder and moved on. I rerouted the cameras to follow her path through the main promenade. Everywhere she went, the pattern repeated. Predators shifted aside. Prey species watched, but didn't flee. It was like watching nobility walk through a crowd, except this one looked like she could kill you using household items. She stopped at a food stall run by a Quilex family. Old Maya, the grandmother who ran it, smiled at her. Smiled. "What can I get you, dear?" Maya asked. "Something with protein," Kira said easily. "Surprise me." As Maya prepared the food, a disturbance broke out near the central plaza. I groaned when I saw the feed. Zark render. 4 arms. Loud mouth. Minimal brainpower. He was harassing a soft-shell merchant, waving his limbs around, making threats he'd recycled 100 times before. Kira turned her head slightly. For the first time, her expression changed. Something cold passed through her green eyes. She paid for her food, took one bite, and began walking toward the plaza. The crowd parted before her without a word. Zark was mid-rant when she stopped behind him, chewing slowly, waiting. The soft-shell merchant noticed her first. His eye stalks shifted, locking onto Kira, and hope flickered across his face. Zark noticed the shift in attention and spun around, all 4 arms flaring wide. His ridges puffed up in what his species considered intimidating. He looked down at Kira. "You got a problem, mammal," he snarled. Kira swallowed, dabbed her mouth with a napkin, and met his gaze. "Yeah," she said calmly. "You're blocking my view of a really interesting cloud formation outside the viewport." From the control room, I burst out laughing. And things were about to get much worse for Zark. Zark's facial ridges flared wider, his pride clearly wounded. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he barked, towering over her with all 4 arms spread wide. Kira took another unhurried bite of her food. "Someone with 4 arms and about 1 functional brain cell," she said. "Impressive symmetry, though." A ripple moved through the gathering crowd, gasps, clicks, chittering laughter. The universal sound of spectators realizing someone had just signed their own death warrant. Zark's upper right hand drifted toward the plasma blade clipped to his belt. Kira moved first. I didn't even see her drop the wrap. 1 second she was holding it. The next, Zark's wrist was locked in her grip, twisted just enough to make the massive reptilian enforcer yelp. His hand froze centimeters from the weapon. With a simple shift of her weight, she forced him down until his knees slammed into the deck plating. Silence swallowed the plaza. "Here's the thing about humans," Kira said conversationally, holding him there with what looked like no effort at all. "We evolved on a death world. Everything back home tried to kill us. The weather. The animals. The plants. Even the microscopic stuff in the water." Zark struggled. She tightened her grip slightly. He stopped. "So we learned how not to die," she continued. "We don't have the biggest claws or the strongest muscles. We don't spit acid or grow armor. But we do have endurance. Ingenuity. And a really irritating tendency to refuse to give up." She leaned closer, her voice still calm. "We're persistence hunters. We just keep going." Zark's breathing grew shallow. "And when I see someone 4 times my size bullying someone smaller," she said, "it triggers something old in my brain. The part that says, that's not right. Fix it." She released him. Zark scrambled backward, all 4 arms flailing, clutching his wrist and staring at her like reality itself had betrayed him. "Now," Kira said evenly, "you're going to apologize to the merchant and leave." Zark glanced at the soft shell. Then at Kira. Then at the silent crowd surrounding him. His pride battled his survival instincts for about 3 seconds. Survival won. "Apologies," he muttered, barely audible, before turning and sprinting toward the nearest exit corridor. Kira retrieved her food wrap from a nearby crate, somehow still untouched. She took another bite and turned to the soft-shell merchant. "You okay?" The merchant bobbed repeatedly, his eye stalks trembling. "Thank you, honored hunter. You did not have to." "Sure I did," Kira interrupted with a genuine smile. Guy was being a jerk. "I don't like bullies." She finished her meal, dropped the wrapper into a recycler, and walked away as if she hadn't just dismantled one of the station's most infamous troublemakers. I stayed glued to the cameras for the next 2 hours. She visited the human food vendor, swapping stories like an old friend. She browsed a weapons shop, handling firearms with the relaxed confidence of someone who truly understood them. She even stopped to help a Puna family fix a malfunctioning hover cart, kneeling on the deck, hands deep in the anti-grav unit while chatting with the kids. Everywhere she went, the same pattern repeated. Predators made space. Prey species drew closer. It was like watching the laws of nature quietly rewrite themselves. Eventually, her time on Terminus Halo came to an end. I followed her on the security feeds as she made her way back toward the docking bays, the station still subtly rearranging itself around her presence. When she reached her ship and began pre-boarding checks, curiosity finally overpowered my caution. I left the control room and hurried down to the bay. "Miss Voss," I called out, scuttling across the deck on my 6 legs. "I'm Vex, the station's docking coordinator." She turned, those sharp green eyes focusing on me. "Yeah. I just wanted to say, what you did earlier. With Sark. That was impressive." She shrugged as if I'd complimented her choice of boots. "He had it coming." I hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in my mind all shift. "Can I ask you something? How does it feel, being what you are out here?" She tilted her head slightly. "And what am I, exactly?" "An apex predator," I said. "The apex of apex predators. Every species that hunts backs down from you. And every species that gets hunted seems to trust you. How does that work?" She smiled. This one was different. Older. It carried the weight of a species that had clawed its way up from the bottom of the food chain. "Because prey species recognize hunters," she said. "They know the difference between something that kills to eat, and something that kills for enjoyment." She paused, then added, "Predators hunt because they must. Humans," she smiled again, "we hunt monsters." She turned and boarded her ship. The airlock sealed. Moments later, the vessel detached from the station and slid silently into the black between stars. I stood there longer than necessary, watching until it vanished from sensors. Rollo crept up beside me. "You think she'll come back?" "I hope so," I said. "This station could use more beings like her. And maybe the galaxy could too. Because when a human enters a room, something fundamental shifts. Not because they're always the largest or the strongest or the most heavily armed, though they can be all of those things, but because they are the species that stared into a universe filled with horrors and said, 'We can handle this.' And then proved it.